to see this as I walk towards the evening of my life. It makes me want to work night and day for the rest of my life to try to make sure that we make the best of the situation.
Our world would be a much better world and a much better place if we would only concentrate on the things we have in common instead of concentrating on our differences. And so I join you as we move forward to uplift not only the nation, but the world.
One of the members said to me, you know, when you used to address the House of Delegates, you were speaking to the state, and here you are speaking to the nation and the world.
There's something going wrong down at the border, a lot. It's not the deed that you do to a child, it's the memory. I want to concentrate on these children, and I want to make sure they are okay. We need to determine how children in the United States of America have been exposed to drinking water poisoned with lead by the actions of their own government. So often, out of our pain comes our passion to do our purpose. As a country, we finally must say that enough is enough. That we are done with the hateful rhetoric, that we are done with the mass shootings, that we are done with the white supremacist domestic terrorists who are terrorizing our country and fighting against everything America stands for and everything our phenomenal military has fought for. We must stand together with those who we do not look like, with those who we disagree with, and recognize that we have more in common than we have that separates us. We're dancing with the angels. Question will be asked. In 2019, what do we do to make sure we kept our democracy intact?
Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord.
The presiding mistress of ceremonies for this tribute, service, and celebration is Miss Rachel Garbo Monroe.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. We're going to begin the program with Reverend Scott H. Adams of Heritage United Church, who is also a board member of the Elijah Cummings Youth Program, to begin this program with an opening prayer. After that opening prayer, we will enjoy a musical selection, as you will see listed in your program, Great is Thy Faithfulness, performed tonight not by Gwendolyn Boyd, who will speak later, but by Cameron Potts. Thank you very much. Reverend, please join us.
Let us prepare our hearts and minds for prayer. Lord, we call on your grace to intervene in this time of distress. Take hold of our grief and our infirmities. Let your face shine upon Congressman Cummings' family, his bride, his children, grandchildren, siblings, nieces, nephews, and staff. Be gracious unto them, O Lord. Look unto them with your favor. Lift up your countenance and give them peace. Let all who have gathered in this space, who have been touched in some way by your servant Elijah, be strengthened to carry on the work of his legacy. Lord, we also gather to effectually and fervently pray as we find ourselves in the midst of a pivotal moment in history, confronted by a disconcerting uncertainty, especially in the wake of profound loss of such a powerful presence who has been a resounding voice of change. So in this pivotal moment, may we stand collectively and commit ourselves to the continuing work of Congressman Cummings, who reminded us that, yes, we can make it over, but we don't have time to be patient. Let this, the day of celebration of his extraordinary life, serve as a clarion call to action, because we can no longer await for change that rolls in on the wheels of inevitability, but we must relentlessly resist inequality and discrimination until justice rolls down like water and righteousness like a mightier stream. Lord, let us embrace an interdependent spirit of solidarity and adjacency as we fight to fully dismantle injustice and willfully work to cultivate for beloved community. For generations yet unborn deserve to know that they can enter into a world where our democracy is intact. Our children who are living the messages to a future we will never live to see deserve the right to be free. So, Lord, as we celebrate the life and legacy of Congressman Elijah Eugene Cummings, may this day mark a pivotal moment in our history where darkness gives way to your light of peace, where your healing for all who mourn springs forth speedily, where your righteousness remains before us in all things, and where your glory is witnessed by all. For great is thy faithfulness, mercies endure forever. In Jesus' name, amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, Cameron Potts.
Great is thy faithfulness, O God, my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassions, they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever wilt be. Summer and winter and springtime and harvest, sun, moon, and stars in their courses above join with all nature in manifold witness to thy great faithfulness, mercy and love. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Pardon for sin and peace that endureth, thine own dear presence to cheer and to guide, strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow. Blessings are mine with 10,000 beside. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Every time I wake up in the morning, brand new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. So great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Lord, unto me.
Okay, so this is a celebration for the life of Elijah Cummings, and we are going to do that tonight, starting with a voice that you just heard. Elijah Cummings was a man who walked the walk and time again stuck up for all of us, our city, his city. A man who was not afraid to say the hard stuff, but said it in a way that moved us and challenged us to be better. No one wants to be here this evening. Our hearts are broken. The only good thing I can say for the many speakers this evening is they will not be in that horrible spot, and they know what I'm saying, the spot of following Elijah Cummings at an event. He was an extraordinary speaker. Perhaps you have been doing what I have been doing these past several days and listening to and reading Elijah's wise comments on so many different and important topics in our world today. And as I've watched and read some of those speeches, I am reminded of the power and the passion that fills a room when someone is doing exactly what he or she is put on this earth to do. In my opinion, Elijah could have been many things, considering his far-reaching, extraordinary talents. Gathering here in this beautiful performing arts center at Morgan State University makes me think that Elijah could have been a masterful jazz musician. An effortless union of competition and collaboration, jazz music allows a single instrument to take the lead, and then almost naturally and unscripted, another one moves to the forefront, while that first instrument takes its cue and moves to the background for support. This is how Elijah lived his political life. He knew when his solo voice was needed on the national stage, and he knew when he was part of a chorus. He was a beacon of leadership in the toughest of times, and he was the first one to lend a hand when you needed it. Now tonight, in his words, and in the words of 27 speakers, you will honor the man, and we together will honor the man who has done so much for our beloved Baltimore. So, without further ado, we begin. I would like to introduce United States Senator Benjamin Cardin. Senator Cardin, having been elected to the House of Representatives in 1986 and the U.S. Senate in 2006, serves as the Dean of the Maryland Congressional Delegation. He and Elijah both attended Baltimore City College, the University of Maryland Law School, and enjoyed the practice of private law. They also served in the House of Delegates, and they both worked as partners representing Baltimore City in the region beginning in 1996. Senator Cardin's statement on Elijah's passing read in part, Chairman Elijah Cummings and I shared a city, an alma mater, a love of law, and a love of public service. The death of Chairman Cummings leaves an irreplaceable void in our hearts, in our Maryland, and in our Congress. Quite possibly no elected official mattered so much to his constituents. His commitment to his city and county and country was unwavering, as will be my lasting respect for him. Please welcome the man that I met one winter day at the Jewish Community Center when my Ben was a baby, who is now almost 18 and here somewhere today.
Rachel, thank you very much. To Maya and the entire Cummings family, take comfort in knowing the depth of the love of our community for Elijah. You feel it here tonight. I've heard it all over Baltimore and our nation, the love and respect for Elijah Cummings. Maya, we share your loss and we stand with you. Elijah loved this country with every fiber of his being. Even though, as a young man, he faced prejudice and discrimination. He attended a segregated elementary school. He was pelted with bottles, rocks, and jeers when he and other children integrated a local public swimming pool. He faced discrimination. And in Elijah's own words, he would say, "We are better than this." And he devoted his entire life to making America better. He advanced measures to improve education, to expand affordable housing, to curb addiction, to enhance public infrastructure, to promote gun safety, to reform police practices, and the list goes on of his accomplishments. Justice Thurgood Marshall said, "We cannot play ostrich. Democracy just can't flourish amid fear. Liberty cannot bloom amid hate. Justice cannot take root among rage. America must get to work." Elijah Cummings took these words to heart, and did he work on behalf of our country. He may have been mild-mannered, but heaven forbid anyone should stand between Elijah and justice. They would hear from Elijah. He was our champion on social justice. America has lost the champion for social justice. As Rachel indicated, Elijah and I shared a common background in both attending Baltimore City College High School in Baltimore City, the University of Maryland Law School. We both served in the Maryland General Assembly together. I was Speaker when he was a freshman member of the House, and he was identified immediately as a person of extraordinary talent. And he showed that talent in his very first years in the Maryland General Assembly. We then served in the House of Representatives together. And I must tell you, he followed in the footsteps of Parent J. Mitchell and Kwesi Mfume. What a legacy from the 7th Congressional District. You know, give the voters of the 7th Congressional credit for sending us their very best to the United States Congress. We've all benefited from your wisdom of who you have sent. I have lost a friend. Our nation has lost a booming voice for truth, fairness, and liberty. Elijah, you have worked hard to make our community a better place for all. Now it is time to rest. Rest in peace, my friend.
Thank you, Senator Cardin. Our next speaker is former United States Senator Barbara Mikulski. Former U.S. Senator Barbara Mikulski served in the U.S. Senate from 1987 to 2017, and she is this country's longest-serving female senator. She also served in the U.S. House of Representatives from 1977 to 87, and she and Elijah Cummings worked on many pieces of important legislation together. In an interview earlier this week on WBAL, Senator Mikulski said, quote, Congressman Cummings could investigate, he could legislate, and he could agitate. And he always knew how to be in the forefront of an agenda around the empowerment of all people, and he had a great heart. Could any of us say it any better? I don't think so. Please welcome one of my favorite tough, smart, and effective leaders who's been a woman warrior, Senator Barbara Mikulski.
I'm back. I'm back for Elijah, and Elijah always had my back and always had your back too. Good evening, everybody. I come here tonight. First, I give all praise and thanksgiving to the dear Lord who brings us here in friendship and fellowship to salute our beloved Congressman Elijah Eugene Cummings. Our deep condolences to Dr. Maya and his family. We feel that we've lost a giant in our country, that we've lost a champion in our Congress, and we feel like we've lost a dear friend in our community. We feel a loss like a special friend passed away. And we feel that loss because Elijah was our friend. There is not a man or woman in Baltimore that does not feel a personal connection to him. With his passing, I have had people come up to me from neighborhoods everywhere, from Howard Park to Howard County, from Patterson Park to Anne Arundel County, from Roland Park to communities far and wide. They felt a connection because he stood up for people, he spoke out for people, and it was always about people. We in the Maryland delegation like to call ourselves Team Maryland. We knew that Elijah was our most valuable player. We always called him VIP. And for Elijah, it was always about fighting for people. It was about jobs, and it was about justice. And I remember when President Obama was elected, and the congressman and I got together to talk about the passage of Obamacare. And in his own eloquent, passionate voice, he said, Barb, you know, we've got to fight. And I said, well, I'm ready to be shoulder to shoulder with you, even if I've got to stand on my little stool. And then he said, but just think about it. In so many neighborhoods I go to, African American men shouldn't get their health care by needing their screening for high blood pressure in a barber shop. It's a good community technique, but that's not a national health care system. Women should not find out if they have diabetes when they have their first baby. They should have learned about that in the first grade when we needed early detection and screening, and they needed their hearing aids and their eyeglasses and whatever helped them learn. He was a passionate fighter, and he couldn't wait every day to get up and to do that. I loved working with him, and he was such a great line of people. That 7th Congressional District with the Honorable P.J. Congressman Mitchell, with Kwesi Mfume, Elijah Cummings. What an honor roll of service. And I did say that he could investigate, legislate, and agitate. But when he agitated, it was never for himself. Social glue that helped Baltimore together. But in bringing about calm, he did not ask people to give up their passion. He did not ask people to give up their anger. He talked about injustice, discrimination, redlined, sidelined. What he did was to take all that anger and passion and to channel it into bringing about change. He was a leader, and we will miss him deeply. In conclusion, many people, as I said, have said goodbye, but I want to just bring a greeting from a very special person. President Obama awarded me the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And on that day, I met Dr. Katherine Johnson. You know Dr. Johnson as the brilliant mathematician in Hidden Figures. We have stayed in touch. She's 100 years old. With the passage of Congressman Cummings, her daughter contacted me and gave me a message from her mother. She said, tell everybody in Baltimore, tell his wife, tell his children and all who regard him as family that we missed him. I might have helped John Glenn get to the moon, but he helped children reach for the stars. God bless you, Elijah, and may the force be with you and guide us as well.
I understand United States Senator Chris Van Hollen has somehow made it into the building. Are you here? Terrific. He just zoomed up from Washington. And so what I'll quickly say is in November 2016, Senator Van Hollen took on this role. He is committed to fighting every day to ensure that our state and our country live up to their full potential and promise of equal rights. And a demonstration to his relationship with Elijah is that he is somehow magically in two places at once by being here and in DC. So, podium's yours.
Like so many of you gathered here, like I trust all of you gathered here, I loved Elijah Cummings, who I knew for almost 30 years. He was a mentor. He's an American hero of our times. I love the way Elijah used that booming voice in the fight for social justice. Always the first one on his feet, whether it was in the Maryland General Assembly or in the United States Congress. I loved Elijah's deep belief in the promise of America and his equally deep conviction that it is our responsibility, each and every one of us, to make that promise come true in America. I loved Elijah's embrace of humanity and the respect that he demonstrated for those of opposing views. In fact, the only thing I didn't love about Elijah, I think it's been mentioned here, was speaking after him in the congressional delegation lineup. Elijah was a man of principle, a man of incredible dignity, and a man with a purpose and a mission. This past May, he was asked by a reporter if he had a message for the President of the United States. And here's what he said: "I want to send a message that we have one life to live, Mr. President. This is no dress rehearsal. The American people simply want to live their lives without fear of their leaders, and we as leaders have a duty and a responsibility to keep our promise to them when we run for office and win, and that is to make their lives better. While we are all on this earth, that's my message." That was Elijah Cummings in May. And that is the way Elijah Cummings lived his entire life, every minute of it, working to make life better for others, trying to bring people together to move our community, our city, our state, and our country forward. And he did it with the fierce urgency of now, without a minute to waste. I go back to his maiden speech now in the House of Representatives. In 1996, there's a tradition when incoming members of Congress give a speech to the entire House chamber and the guests. And he finished that speech by reciting what he described as a very simple poem that I live by. Here's the poem. You may have heard him say it many times. "I only have a minute, 60 seconds in it, forced upon me. I did not choose it, but I know that I must use it. Give account if I abuse it, suffer if I lose it. Only a tiny little minute, but eternity is in it." I heard Elijah remind us of that all the time. And that's how Elijah Cummings lived his life. Every minute counted. Every minute mattered in the fight for justice. Every minute counted in the battle to protect and save our democracies. In that maiden speech, back in 1996, Elijah Cummings said, "I am looking forward to joining with all of you as we travel this road I often call journey, which I define as life." To Maya, to Elijah's family, we join you in mourning Elijah's loss, our state's loss, our country's loss, the world's loss. We join you in that mourning, but we thank God every day for the gift that was the journey and the life of Elijah Cummings.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I now have the privilege of introducing Maryland State President Thomas V. Mike Miller, or Mike Miller as he is known. He first ran for the Maryland House of Delegates in 1970, and after a term in the House, was elected to the Maryland Senate in 1974. In 1987, he was elected president of the Maryland Senate, making him the longest-serving president in Maryland history, as well as the longest-serving state Senate president across the United States. President Miller has been quoted as saying, "My friend and role model Elijah Cummings was one of the people I most admired in politics." And Mike Miller met everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you for your decades of leadership and service to Maryland. We are forever grateful, and we know how important it was to you to be here.
Folks, thank you very much. We're so honored to be here. We're now down to the state level where we understand about minutes, don't we? We got 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes or less. Let me just say this. I'm one honored to be here. Maya Rockamore Cummings, thank you for inviting me to be here. I'm so pleased and privileged to be here. Yesterday at this time, I was at Hopkins in a cancer bed. And I said to the doctor, when I got the invitation, I said, look, I've got to get out of this hospital. And that's true. And not only did the doctor, but every attendant knew why, okay? Because one, I had to say a couple words on behalf of my mentor, my mentee, Elijah Cummings, but also I had to hear the remarks from his friends and his family and people honoring him. When we heard about Elijah passing, my staff put on Facebook a picture of the two favorite pictures of Elijah and myself, clasping each other, laughing at each other. And it's got over 1,000 likes. People want to know, what's the story behind this picture of these two grown men holding each other, laughing at each other? And the story is this. Elijah, every time he would see you, he'd say, thank you. Thank you for being my friend. Thank you for being here. And I'd say, Elijah, why do you have to keep saying that? He goes, you're my friend. You don't have to be here. I said, Elijah, you are history. You are history. You are state history. You're national history. He goes, do you really think so? Do you really think so? I said, of course you are. I said, in Baltimore, you're history because of Channel 2, Channel 11, Channel 13, the Baltimore Sun. He said, but I come to all your fundraisers, every one of your fundraisers. They know me. They wave at me. They say, Congressman, how are you? I say, Elijah, they think you're Congressman John Lewis, for God's sakes. He goes, and we grasped each other and started laughing. He goes, you know it's true. I go, hi, 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 hi. Folks, thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting our friend, our mentor, our mentee. As he would tell you, we're the greatest country in the world. We're the luckiest people in the world because we're citizens of the United States, residents of the state of Maryland, and we've had the lucky honor of having a man named Elijah Cummings walk through our life. Thank you, and God bless you. Thank you so very much. It's a privilege and honor to be here. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being with us. This past May, Adrienne Jones became the first African American and first woman to be elected Speaker of the Maryland House of Delegates, having been a member in the House since 1997. Prior to this position, she followed in Elijah's footsteps, serving as the second African American Speaker pro tem in history. Ms. Jones is a Baltimore County-owned girl, graduating from Lansdowne High School and UMBC. We are proud of her, we are excited for her leadership, and we thank her for being with us.
To Maya and family, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. For over 3 decades, Elijah Cummings had been a juggernaut for social justice and a political pioneer. His career of service began in the Maryland House of Delegates in 1983, when he blazed a pathway for me when he became the first African American Speaker pro tem in Maryland history in 1996. As a congressman, his leadership epitomized wisdom and strength. When the federal shutdown threatened the livelihood of over 20,000 Marylanders, Cummings took the necessary action to alleviate the pain of missing a paycheck and got federal employees back to work. He courageously stood against the president and stood up for Baltimore when the president's remarks disparaged the city. Many will remember the congressman as the House Oversight and Reform Committee chairman and the leader in the fight for our democracy, but he never lost sight of Maryland and his constituents. He introduced legislation to end racial profiling by law enforcement, championed school safety in an effort to reduce violent crime in schools, and when Baltimore was in turmoil following Freddie Gray's tragic death, he was our consoler in chief and helped reunite a fractured city. Elijah Cummings was everything you'll read and hear about him: a prolific speaker, a political giant, a civil rights advocate, but I'll remember him as a friend and a teacher. This is a great loss for our state and our country, but we can take solace in the fact that his impact will last for generations. So when you have a question or concern and you want to pick up the phone to call him, just ask yourself, what would Elijah do? You'll know what the answer will be. Thank you.
Maryland State Delegate Nick Mosby has been a member of the House since 2017 and is a member of the Ways and Means Committee. Previously, he served on Baltimore City Council. And with Nick coming to the podium together will be his wife. Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby was sworn in as the 25th State's Attorney for Baltimore City in January 2015, making her the youngest chief prosecutor of any major American city. Recently, she wrote, and I quote, "After we pause to reflect on Elijah's immense legacy, the greatest tribute we can make is to commit ourselves to the work and the people he cared so deeply for." I could not agree more. We look forward to hearing from both of you.
Good evening. To Congressman Cummings' beloved wife, Maya, and to his entire family, our hearts are with you, and we are praying for you and with you as you begin to cope with the profound loss of your husband, your father, your brother, and your friend. Congressman Cummings was not only my role model, he was my mentor, he was my friend, and a trusted advisor to me and my husband. So please know that we love you and we will always be there for you, even after the phone calls and the condolences cease. In John, the 14th chapter, the Lord confronts his disciples by telling them, "I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may also be." For believers, this is undoubtedly the ultimate covenant that our Lord has made with us. It establishes that there is a reward for those of us who live well, do good, and are faithful to his commandments. Inherent in this covenant is the understanding that heaven is our goal and that heaven is a prepared place for prepared people. We are assured through our faith and through the evidence of God's grace and mercy throughout our lives that he will do exactly what he promised us. We all know that heaven is real, and we know that God has prepared a place for us to spend eternity with him. But the question that we must all answer for ourselves and ultimately before God is, are we prepared? Have we lived a life of service towards others? Have we helped to feed the poor? Have we tried to make the world a better place for our children? Have we loved our neighbors? Have we treated others the way that we would want to be treated? When we examine the life of Congressman Elijah Eugene Cummings, we see a life of service, sacrifice, and selflessness. We see a man who tireless in his efforts to create greater opportunities for those who needed a leg up in life. We see a man who sat with royalty and heads of states at the most exclusive tables, but was just as at ease, surrounded by walking and talking with everyday Baltimoreans, inspiring, teaching, and leading his community like only he could for 36 years as an elected official, community leader, and an activist. Congressman Cummings didn't just represent Baltimore's 7th congressional district. He fought for our city and our country, and when both came under attack, he put himself on the line in defense of our democracy. Yes, Elijah Cummings was our leader, and we love and respect him because he was a rare breed. He was a man who never lost the common touch, who never forgot where he came from, who never forgot about us, and who always made sure that he was pouring into the lives of those who were counting on him. And so even through our sadness and our tears, we can be comforted in knowing that Congressman Elijah Cummings lived his life in such a way that God's promise of a prepared place for prepared people is now fulfilled. We have so much evidence of Elijah's preparation, the difference he made, the people he lifted, the lives he touched. We have evidence. We can examine Elijah's legislative record and all he's done to make health care accessible for more people, all he's done to protect the right to vote, all he's done to create opportunities for those who needed a second chance at triumph, all that he's done to ensure that our babies have clean drinking water, all that he's done in his advocacy against witness intimidation in the home of witness intimidation. There is so much we could say and to show and to prove that Congressman earned his eternal rest by serving and by leading and inspiring. But for me and for my family, his impact and the evidence of the kind of man he was intensely personal. You see, Congressman mentored us. He poured into us not only as elected officials, but as a family, as a unit, as parents. He reminded us often to value one another and to always put family first. He treated us like we were his family. He often said in speeches, by phone, via text, how proud he was of us and how glad he was to be a part of our destiny. I can't even begin to express the depths of my pride and my gratitude for him allowing us to be a part of his life, a part of his destiny. His courage, his passion, his spirit was inspirational. He was fearless. He stood against injustice and stood for the ideals of every American, which is why I feel so blessed to witness in him an example of what public service truly means. In his unique way that can never be replicated, Elijah had a way of making you feel so important and so powerful, not because of the office that you hold or the seat that you occupy, but because of the awesome responsibility that you are blessed with, because people are depending on you and looking towards you to lead and to create a path for their families and for their communities to do better, to have more, and to go further. It was as if he possessed a sixth sense. He knew when we needed a pat on the back, a pep talk, or even a kick in the butt. When you needed to be picked up and when you needed to be brought down a notch or two, he never let us forget that this work was never about us, but always about the people we are entrusted to serve and to represent. Nothing felt better or more encouraging than to hear Elijah Cummings say, "Good job, I'm proud of you." Nothing made you go harder than Elijah Cummings saying, "Come on now, get it together." You see, he led with love, he counseled with grace, he was authentic, real, and serious about the work of helping people. He was always there for us and supportive to no end. He was our sounding board and often our litmus test on what to say and how to move. He is everything we hope to be as leaders in this community: honest, dependable, upright, consistent, He gave himself selflessly and generously. He showed us that to be effective in places like Baltimore, you have to be a shepherd that smells like the sheep, and the people have to be able to see you and to touch you and not just hear you. And so we have evidence that Congressman Elijah Cummings lived well, did good, and was faithful, and oh, so prepared for heaven. Prepared to realize God's greatest promise of us. Prepared place for rest in eternity. Congressman, I need you to know you earned your rest, and we are forever grateful for your love and your service, your sacrifice, your witness, and your example. We will never forget you or stop being grateful for you. You are to us a family, a community, and to this nation, like other great Marylanders before you, Frederick Douglass, Thurgood Marshall, Perrin J. Mitchell, Harriet Tubman, Juanita Jackson Mitchell. Your legacy is secure and your impact is immense. We commit ourselves to holding up the standard that you set, always remembering that it's never about us, but always for the people. Words are insufficient to explain to you how much you meant to me and how much it mattered when you stood with me when very few would. I appreciate you, I love you, and promise to live and to serve as you have taught us. Rest well, my good friend.
Maya, as you can see, we're going to truly miss our double dates. You know he was my guy. He often, when it was just me and him, would talk so fondly of you. And he would always be so worried about me and Maryland being elected officials and us having busy schedules and how our family life was. And he would constantly coach me on that, and I'm going to remember that. Ada and Jennifer, I have 2 little girls. And those same discussions that he had about my wife and my family, he had about you as his daughters, and the importance of ensuring that he poured into you. See, Congressman Cummings to me was more than a mentor. Growing up in the city of Baltimore, without any males in my house, I grew up out in a house with 6 women, a 3-bedroom house right up the street in Northeast Baltimore. But he was always that guy I looked for, that man that could be in my life, that man that could provide advice. The 2 things that I found out about Congressman Cummings that I hold against him that unfortunately he did wrong was attend Baltimore City College. I'm sorry, Dr. Gibson and Senator Carton, and the second thing that I'll tell you that I found out that really hurt me about Congressman Cummings was that he played football for Baltimore City College. So I had the opportunity to first meet Congressman Cummings my senior year. I was Student Government Association president at Poly, and he was my commencement speaker. And just in the good old oratory fashion of Congressman Cummings, he gave a rousing speech, and I wanted to know who this man was. And I didn't get a chance to cross paths with Congressman Cummings until 14 years later, when at the age of 26, I decided to run for Baltimore City Council. And I said, if you're going to run for office in the city, there's one person you have to reach out to, and that's Congressman Elijah Cummings. So Vernon can attest to this. I called, I emailed, and I never got a chance to talk to Congressman Cummings before I lost. But what I will tell you is that next morning, my phone rang, and it was Elijah Cummings. And he said, Nick Mosby, you've been calling me, you've been emailing me, you've been trying to get to me. You know, I had to stay out of the race, but I really want to sit down and talk to you. And he did. We sat down, we spoke. I'll never forget, I was pinching myself, and we went to breakfast. And from there, our relationship grew, and he put me on the Elijah Cummings Youth Programs Board. And then this is the next point of disappointment. I went to Congressman Cummings. I said, Congressman Cummings, I'm going to run for the 7th councilmanic seat on the Baltimore City Council. He said, Nick, you're wasting your time. He said, man, you can't do that. It was right after ECYP meeting. He said, you can't do that, man. He said, you're going to lose, and you can't lose twice. He said, in this game, you know, losing twice is a bad thing. I'm telling you, Nick, don't do it. But he said, hey, man, you got to do what you want to do. So being a foolish 31-year-old, I decided to run anyway. And 2 or 3 weeks before the election, I got another call from Congressman Cummings. And he said he was going to support me. He was going to endorse me. You know, I kept in touch with him throughout the campaign, but I had completely no surprise. I completely did not know that he was going to come out and say he was going to be there for me and support me, and he did. And I won. What I would like to say about Congressman Cummings is that just like his prophetic name, Elijah, and what Elijah meant in the Bible, not a lot what Elijah meant to himself, but what Elijah meant to everyone else. Like Elisha. So there's Elijah, the mentor, and Elisha, the mentee. Elijah, the mentor, and Elisha, the mentee. That's who he was. And it wasn't just to me or my wife, but it was to all folks who came in contact with him, consistently ensuring that he wasn't about the people. I'm going to say that again. He wasn't about the people. He was the people. He consistently governed with his emotion, but never allowed his emotions to govern him. Selfish, prophetic man concerned more about the people around him and less about himself. I'm truly thankful. Congressman Cummings, life planted a seed in my heart and watered it with love, wisdom, honesty, and I'm appreciative and will never, ever forget that this giant of a man has meant to me, to my family, to Baltimore, to this country. When the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven, Elijah said to Elisha, stay here, the Lord has sent me to Bethel. He's prepared us all to continue to do great things. His legacy will never die. Thank you so much, Congressman Cummings.
Thank you both very much. Our next speaker is Baltimore Mayor Bernard Jack Young, the 51st Mayor of Baltimore City. From 2010 to 2019, he served as president of the Baltimore City Council, and for 14 years prior to that as a district councilman. Our mayor shared a special connection with Congressman Cummings. Shortly after being elevated to Baltimore's mayor this past spring, Mayor Young met with Congressman Cummings at his office on Park Avenue. The congressman had a simple message for our new mayor. Quote, how can I be helpful? With 5 words, Congressman Cummings encapsulated what his life's work was about, being of service in ways big and small to all of those around him. Mayor Young, thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. First, giving honor to God, to this family, to Maya, the wife of our dearest Congressman Elijah Cummings, to the Congressman's children and sibling, to his staff, to his extended family and many friends who've gathered inside this center this evening, to his colleagues in public service, to Baltimore and to the nation. We join together this evening with heavy hearts. If I had to pick one word to describe Congressman Cummings, it would be friend. He was a friend of strangers, those who he fought for during the beginning of his career as a trial attorney. He was a friend to the thousands of constituents he represented, first as a state delegate, then as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. but he was also a friend to me personally. I received a call from the congressman back in April, shortly after I assumed the role of mayor. It was an extremely difficult time. The city was going through a trying time, and operationally, we were dealing with a number of challenges. A ransomware attack that was the most destructive to any U.S. city in history. Infrastructure challenges from sinkholes to massive water main breaks. It was a tough time. In the midst of this storm, I accepted a call and heard that familiar baritone on the other end. "Jack, it's Elijah. How can I help you?" Those words still ring in my ear even now. He was a man who literally was fighting for the soul of our democracy, as he was often quoted as saying, and he took time out to run to the side of a new mayor, extend a helping hand and say, "How can I help you?" I'm going to miss his spirit. I think all of us can learn a lot from Congressman Cummings. We should all pledge to extend our hand and say to those around us, "How can I help you?" That's what real friendship looks like. Thank you, Elijah. May the work you've done speak for you. Job well done.
Thank you, Mayor. Stephanie Rawlings Blake served as the 49th mayor of Baltimore from 2010 to 2016, only the second woman in the history of the city to hold that office. She has also served as secretary of the Democratic National Committee and president of the United States Conference of Mayors. Her family and Elijah's family have a very special connection, and we're grateful she joined us this evening.
Good evening, everyone. You know you can do better than that. Good evening, everyone. To Maya and Congressman Cummings' entire family, we've spoken. You know you have my condolences and my prayers. And for those of us who have served in elected office, you know that while our family mourns for us, the people we spend more time with than our family sometimes is our staff. So to his entire team, who has been there for so many years, you have my prayers, my hugs. If I can be there for you, please know that I am. I know how much you cared and supported Congressman Cummings. He was a convocation train, bringing people together and carrying a generation through the narrows and the travails of the fight for social justice. I knew Congressman Cummings since I was a child. He was a friend of my father, and my father was a friend to him. I was inspired by both of those great men into a life of service. Some would say he was a congressman who preached. Others would say he's a preacher of liberation theology who served in Congress. We know here in Baltimore, we knew he was a brilliant mix of both of those things. I think that's why it was so hard for me when I was thinking of the right thing to say this evening. All I kept hearing in my head were songs. Anthems of a life well lived by a God-fearing man. So I certainly would not have made the cut to be up with you on the Morgan Choir, so I know someone's gonna have to help me out when I say, "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, was blind, but now I see. I knew they would help me out. You see, the leadership in Congress gave him the gavel, but his life gave us a song. If I can help somebody as I travel along, if I can help someone with a word or a song, if I can help somebody from doing wrong, my living shall not be in vain. So on last Thursday morning, that song that he had been singing for years became his reality. Some glad morning, when his life is over, he'll fly away. To that home on God's celestial shore, he'll fly away. Oh, glory, when he dies, hallelujah, by and by Elijah flew away. And this is why we're here, to say farewell in the tradition that we all love. Sleep on, sweet prince. If we live right, heaven belongs to all of us. We'll see you in the morning, and I promise, as we all must promise, to keep his fight alive. Thank you.
Thank you. In May 2019, Brandon Scott was unanimously elected president of the Baltimore City Council. Previously, he served as the city council member representing Baltimore City's 2nd District. He is a community leader, public servant, lifelong resident of Baltimore City. He was first elected in 2011 at the age of 27, making him one of the youngest people ever elected into city council. He credits Congressman Cummings for blazing a trail that opened doors for sons of Baltimore to serve in elected office. When President Scott concludes his remarks, we will enjoy a musical selection as listed in your program by the Morgan State University Choir.
Good evening. To Dr. Cummings and the entire Cummings family, my heart and the entire heart of Baltimore goes out to you in this tough time. And this is a tough time, but as the congressman would often say, it is certainly my honor and privilege to be here with you this evening. In Baltimore, while we all are grieving the loss of our North Star, tonight we are also here to celebrate the life of Congressman Elijah Cummings. So I need one thing from everybody. I need Lottie, Dottie, and everybody to get on your feet and praise the life of our servant, Congressman Elijah Cummings. Every successful person has someone who has positively impacted their life, someone to encourage you, someone to show you the way. Congressman Cummings was that for me, a mentor in politics, but more so in life. To be a good mentor, you have to do more than just care. You also have to invest time into the development of the next generation. You have to be a living example of what they should be. It's what Elijah Cummings was to me and so many others, a living, breathing example of how to be a strong man of integrity, humility, and purpose, who just happened to be an elected servant. I will always treasure the times we spent together on the phone, and unlike everybody else, I've not been known to be the most obedient public servant, so he wasn't always as happy with me as everybody else. Sometimes he say, Brandon, I need to see you. And I go, oh, I'm in trouble. But on the phone, in his office, or even at a concert, each time he spoke with me, I learned something. every time I would learn something. One piece of wisdom has been on my heart recently because it's one of the last things he said to me. He said, Brandon, one thing that I've always liked about you, when you battle with someone, you never disrespect them. You can disagree with someone, but do that with dignity and respect for yourselves and for them. And I sat there quietly as he wasn't done, and he said, because Brandon, one day your title will go away, but that dignity and respect that you have for yourself and for others will be with you forever. And then the world watched him embody that as the President of the United States attacked him and all of us here in Baltimore. He handled that with an amount of dignity and calm we don't always see from our public figures, but that was typical for him. That kind wisdom and dignity is why we are all here today. That's why the nation mourns with us, because we lost a man who was of and was for the people. He was the best of us. He was the best that we had to offer. Not because he was our congressman, but because he was never too proud or too high-minded or too busy to take time to invest in each of us. He mentored all of us every time he spoke. He made a way for us, and for that, we simply say thank you. The congressman will often say, our children are the living messages we send to a future we will never see. I just hope and pray that every time he looked at me, and so many of us here tonight, that he saw that the future, and he knew it would be bright because of the light that he ignited in all of us. Thank you, Congressman Elijah Cummings. I love you. May you rest in eternal peace. Thank you.
If I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a word or song, if I can show somebody he is traveling wrong, then my living shall not be in vain. If I can do duty as a Christian ought, if I can bring back beauty to a world abroad, if I can spread love's message as the Master taught, then my living shall not be in vain. living shall not be.
How's that for talent? Wow. Thank you all very much. Music is a powerful, powerful thing to bring our emotions in the moment. So now, moving on to the next speaker. Reverend Alvin Hathaway is the senior pastor at Union Baptist Church. He graduated with Elijah from then a mostly white high school, Baltimore City College, in 1969. I might have been born that year. By his own account, Reverend Hathaway was the more interested in sports during those years, but Elijah pushed him to excel academically, telling him there was more at stake than his own school record. Elijah would say, quote, "We are leaders of our race. We are leaders of our community. We have to do the right thing." You, Reverend, have made an extraordinary difference in Baltimore each and every day, and those of us who work in this city see it and know it, and thank you. We look forward to hearing your words.
Dr. Maya and Cummings family, staff, I am just deeply touched and honored just to say a few words about my friend. Our orbits intersected in September 1963 when we entered the 7th grade together at Gwynns Falls Park Junior High School. We were assigned to Class 701, which was an accelerated class for intelligent students. I don't know how I got in it, but that's what it was. Elijah lived south of what we know as the West Side Shopping Center, and I lived north of the West Side Shopping Center near Baltimore Street. Elijah, like all of us, would walk to school. He would time himself leaving his home so that he could join up with my crew, and we would walk to school together. We liked Elijah because he had a unique talent, even then, for telling funny stories. His ability to tell jokes and stories endeared him to us, and we became his protectors as we walked through different neighborhoods to school. A portion of our journey to school caused us to walk through a wooden area that was known for muggings and robberies. Because Elijah was with our crew, he never experienced any trouble traveling through that wooded area. We've remained friends ever since, some 57 years. The word that best describes Elijah E. Cummings, and we call him EE because E.E. Cummings was the first African-American to city council, and even then, we called him EE, is precocious. Precocious means exhibiting mature qualities at an unusual early age. Elijah Cummings was precocious. I got in trouble in the 8th grade, Miss Scott's class. I used a vulgar 4-letter word, and she heard it. I believe I was Elijah's first client because he advised me to challenge Miss Scott on why the 4-letter word I used was deemed vulgar. Miss Scott told me that if I could present to her the epistemology of the word, she would not send me to the principal for punishment. After class, Elijah showed me how to trace the epistemology of these 4-letter words. And we discovered why they were deemed vulgar. Next day, I presented my case to Miss Scott. The class was waiting in anticipation for what I would say. I stood before the class with an Elijah-assisted brief and explained that the four-letter words were of Saxon origin, and that it was only because the Saxons lost the Battle of Hastings that their language and culture was deemed vulgar. Elijah gave me the punchline. If the Saxons had won that battle, we would all be using four-letter words. Dr. Samuel L. Banks, who was steeped in African-American history, first discovered Elijah's amazing ability in the 7th grade. He was our social studies teacher. Dr. Banks would later become the president of the Association for the Study of African-American Life and History, founded by Dr. Carter G. Woodson. That was our social studies teacher. Dr. Banks journeyed with us, he mentored us, he tutored us, he challenged us, and he taught us in the 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade at Gwynns Falls Park Junior High School. And when Elijah and I went to Baltimore City College, Dr. Banks went with us as well. And he became our 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade teacher. He poured into us a rich history of what it meant to be African American. And you don't realize that there, and when we went to the 7th grade, we were Negroes. But when we graduated from Baltimore City College in the 12th grade, we were African American men. It was a major school that we attended. It was a school of athletes. You swam, you ran track, you played football, you played basketball, you played baseball. It was a school of athletes. But when you look at Elijah Cummings' yearbook, he was in no athletic team. But he was president of our class. You look at it, it says SGA. Look at it, it says student government. Look at it, it says academics was my pursuit. I was in the literary society. And we elected him as the president of the class because he had a unique ability for the minutia of meetings. Robert Rules of Order, procedure, voting. I said, man, nobody wants to be bothered with it. He did. He did it representing us well. I want you to know that long before Elijah made famous the poem, We Only Have a Minute, he convinced the 1969 class of City College to adopt these words of our theme song. Those words came from a movie called Man of La Mancha. And I believe the words of this song was his guiding principle throughout his life. To dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, to bear with unbearable sorrow, to run where the brave dare not go, to right the unrightable wrong, to love pure and chaste from afar, to try when your arms are too weary, to reach the impossible star. At this point, Elijah would get real loud. He would say, this is my quest to follow that star, no matter how hopeless, no matter how far, to fight for the right without question or pause, to be willing to march into hell for a heavenly cause. And I know if I only be true to this glorious quest, that my heart will lie peaceful and calm when I'm laid to my rest. And the world will be better for this, that one man scorned and covered with scars still strove with his last ounce of courage to reach, to reach the impossible star.
Thank you so much. So our next speaker is Dr. Laura F. Hargrove. She's a native of Baltimore, and she accepted her call to preach in 1995. She preached her initial sermon at Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Baltimore. Reverend, thank you for being with us this evening. We look forward to your remarks.
Good evening to Dr. Maya Cummings, the Cummings family, and to all who have gathered in this historic place that we know as Morgan State University. I greet you in the power and the presence of the Prince of Peace. Every good homiletician is taught that whenever and wherever possible, let the text preach for itself. I stand tonight to let the words of the distinguished gentlemen from Baltimore speak and preach for themselves. I see that look. Those were the words that Congressman Cummings spoke to me in his office on April 2nd of this year. I see that look. That was the day that I delivered the opening prayer before the House of Representatives. Mr. Cummings did not make it to the House floor that morning because he was constrained by an urgent matter concerning the resident on Pennsylvania Avenue and his Russian cohort. It was an absence for which the congressman rendered to me an unnecessary apology. After a brief conversation about a letter I received from him in 2018, he said to me, "I see that look." Quite frankly, I had no clue as to the look that he was referring to. So I said, "And Congressman, what look might that be?" He said, "The look that tells me that you want to pray." And without hesitation, he steadied himself on his walker with his left hand, extended his right hand to me, closed his eyes, and bowed his head. It was a hallowed moment of humility, transparency, and grace. Through his actions alone, he welcomed me to both pray with him and for him privately. That look that he talked about refers to many things. If your eyes are fixed long enough and one's soul is receptive enough to see what only spiritual eyes can encounter and appreciate. When the prayer had concluded, I too saw that look. The look of gratefulness behind glassy, water-filled eyes. The look that said he was willing to steal away from the pressures of his daily responsibilities to encounter a God moment, to refresh and refocus, to talk about the letter he sent in response to the one that I had sent a year prior to his passing on October 17th, 2018. I had his handwritten note with me that day because I wanted him to know that it would be something that I would forever cherish, not just because of the graciousness extended to me in that letter, but more so because of the sentiments that he penned about my father, the late Judge John R. Hargrove Sr. You see, decades prior to that moment, a young Elijah Cummings had forged a relationship with my father, a legal mentor of sorts, a man 28 years his senior. That communal connection afforded my father the opportunity to see that look on a new attorney, Elijah E. Cummings. It was the look of integrity, authenticity. It was the look of resilience resting on his shoulders. And I choose to believe that my father also saw the look of potential greatness hovering over the congressman's head. In the words of the Lebanese author and poet Khalil Gibran, it is better to give unasked through understanding. My father had an understanding about the importance of how a man's dignity, a Black man's dignity and confidence was tied to his appearance. And through understanding, gave this young budding attorney the money to buy a suit for his first day in court. It was a story my father never shared with any of us. And it was a private moment and memory that the seasoned congressman did not have to share, but he did. On that early April day, he said, "You will never know what your father did for me. You just will never know." I saw that look again. A look that said that the moment and the memory were about far more than just being suitable in court. It was about community, compassion, connectedness of a man paying it forward to one coming behind him who would spend his life paying it forward for this great city, this state, this nation, but most importantly, paying it forward for humanity everywhere. He sought that look and saw that look in others because it was his life's duty and delight, as the hymn, "A Charge to Keep I Have" says, to serve this present age, my calling to fulfill. Oh, may it all my powers engage to do the Master's will. Not only did his work speak for him that day, as they did every day, his integrity, compassion, authenticity, his understanding of community over autonomy can unarguably preach his life and his faith, which he clung to unapologetically. To the distinguished gentleman from Baltimore in absentia, time has yielded itself to that look from eternity that beckoned you to step back from your well-done determination and dedication, your strength and your struggle, your tenderness in tough times, to now rest from your labors, for your works will indeed follow you. To the countless, unnumbered, and unnamed persons for whom this great man fought tirelessly, we will never know the full magnitude of his character in these perilous times in which we live, until we are able to step back ourselves and see how this man has shaped history in this moment. To be clear, he has left his indelible footprint in this life. But it is up to those of us who are alive and remain to seek that look, to see those who are invisible to others, to work while it is yet day, to also serve this present age as Elijah E. Cummings did, while we look unto the hills from whence cometh our help, in the like manner that he looked unto the hills of his God, from whence came his help. Dr. Maya, I thank you for the privilege and honor of standing before you tonight. But I want you to know, your husband also saw that look on you, the look of love that is in your eyes. And God sees the look of sorrow that is in your heart. But as I said to you last week, the God that you and I know is walking with you through the valley of the shadow of death and will continue to walk with you through. I thank God for the life of Congressman Elijah Cummings. I thank God for his legacy. We thank God for his love. So eternal rest grant unto him, O Lord, and perpetual light shine upon him. May his soul and the souls of all the faithful departed through the mercy of God rest in peace. Amen.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Reverend Dr. Sheridan Todd Yeary. He is the senior pastor of Douglas Memorial Community Church in Baltimore and the chair of the Baltimore Community Relations Commission. He's also an adjunct professor in the College of Public Affairs at the University of Baltimore. And like many of us, he knew Elijah as a genuine friend and as a fierce protector of the rights of everybody. Thank you for being with us.
Tonight, I am honored and humbled to join with this tremendous chorus of grateful people in the plain view of a world that watches as we begin to publicly salute and celebrate the life and now the legacy of our beloved Congressman Elijah Eugene Cummings. To Dr. Maya Rockymore Cummings and the Cummings family, we are praying for you in this hour of grief. Life feels different for all of us, but more poignantly for you. How we continue to wrestle with the thought of journeying ahead without the presence of our beloved Congressman. Thank you, Maya, for how you supported and walked with your husband each and every day, all the way to the end. We are grateful for your fearless and relentless protection of him and support of his work. Can we put our hands together for Dr. Cummings? There have been countless tributes to Congressman Cummings on television, in print, on social media, all of them speaking to the compassionate giant of a man whom we now mourn. We mourn not simply because of the bigness of his belief that we could be the community and nation we most needed to be, but also because he was touchable. Elijah Cummings kept his feet on the ground, his heart open to people, and his hope focused on goals that for some would be impossible. When he would speak, often in the middle of a sentence, his testimony would grip him. He would think about how good God had been to him, and he would speak more like a frustrated prophet forced to do his work in a strange arena, the arena of politics. More preacher and prophet than politician and pundit, Elijah Cummings violated the rules of the politics of ambition and put the righteousness of concern for all people on full display. He had adversaries, but never enemies. He saw possibility in everybody. In the fall semester of 2017, I was teaching a course on American government at the University of Baltimore. and wanted my students to have an opportunity to speak to someone who knew what government could be and what government ought do. On one December afternoon, just a few months after a lengthy hospital stay, Congressman Cummings came to my class and to speak to them in open assembly. I had secured the only opening on his calendar, and on that day there was an unusually bitter chill in the December air. However, in that venue, a university lecture hall, you felt the warmth of Elijah Cummings' genuineness and his love for public service. It was classic Elijah Cummings. He was passionate, he was profound, and he was personal. He stood so long until I began to be concerned that he was doing too much, but he never stopped standing until the time had come to end class. That was who he was. Elijah Cummings came because it was important to him and the students. When I asked after his lecture if I should have the car brought around for him after the presentation, he simply said, "My doctor says I need to get my steps in." Here was one who, in getting his steps in, challenged the system and confronted the status quo of our politics, believing that in his oft-heard exhortation, we are better than this. We are better than what we have seen in recent months. So tonight, I quote another named Elijah. It was his middle name, but he too was a motivator of those who would be called upon to lead. You see, Benjamin Elijah Mays was also the son of South Carolina sharecroppers who had to overcome the burden of low expectations imposed upon him. Congressman Cummings actually quoted Benjamin Mays, that's the minute poem, when he first went to Congress, as he reminded us about the reality of time and that none of us has time to waste. Dr. Mays said, "It must be borne in mind that the tragedy of life does not lie in not reaching your goal. The tragedy lies in having no goal to reach. It isn't a calamity to die with dreams unfulfilled, but it is a calamity not to dream. It is not a disaster to be unable to capture your ideal, but it is a disaster to have no ideal to capture. It is not a disgrace not to reach the stars, but it is a disgrace to have no stars to reach for. Not failure, but low aim is sin." Our Elijah walked humbly, carefully, thoughtfully, and sincerely. And though he has been taken away, we are left to keep walking, keep working, keep trying to make our city, our nation, and the world a better place, because failure is not our problem. Low aim and low expectations are our problem. If I could channel what I might hear from him now, I can hear the congressman say, "Yeri, set lofty goals and work hard to achieve them. Dream big dreams and work hard to fulfill them. Stare failure in the eye and don't you dare blink, because you must look through the cynicism and low expectations of our current situation and see a world as it can be and not make excuses for the world to remain as it is. We are better than this." Not failure, but low aim is sin. To the beautiful people of Baltimore City, to the wonderful mosaic that makes up the United States of America, and to all of the global citizens who now mourn with us in the transition of our beloved congressman, we too need to get our steps in. We've got more walking to do. I hope you have your step counter on your wrist and in your heart, because we need to take good aim and reach for the stars because Elijah Cummings has shown us how in real time. Let us walk together until the work is done, walk. Until hope is renewed, walk. Until justice is achieved, walk. Until all that God has placed in us, God gets out of us. Because Elijah Eugene Cummings, son of sharecroppers and gift to the world, got his steps in. My beloved friend, mentor, and our congressman, may your dance with the angels be sweet, and may your eternal reward be commensurate with your service. Good night, dear brother, until we meet again.
So we have two more speakers, and then we have the Morgan State Choir singing, and then we have a few more to go. I'm in the very unenviable spot of asking future speakers to please be very mindful of time. And with that, I'm going to introduce Mark Terrell, who is the president of the Associated Jewish Community Federation of Baltimore. He has been in that role since 2003. He is one of only 6 people serving in that position in the 100-year history of the organization. And he is someone who I worked with in a prior job and still work with as a colleague at the Weinberg Foundation. I'm very grateful that he is here representing the Jewish community. Mark Terrell.
Good evening. I feel the presence of God in this room. I feel the presence of God in the beautiful words that have been spoken about our dear friend, and I feel the presence of God. My heart and soul are still humming from these incredible human beings who sung with such beauty and grace. To Maya and to the family, my heartfelt condolences. The Jewish community this evening and every day joins with people of goodwill and faith-based communities in striving to make the world a better place, and in mourning the loss of our dear friend Elijah Cummings, and in celebrating the lessons that he taught us. A tzaddik, an ancient Hebrew label that is granted and bestowed upon those who are righteous, a person who stands for inclusion, a person who approaches all endeavors with empathy and with compassion, a person who selflessly determines to serve. If ever there was a tzaddik, that tzaddik is Elijah Cummings. I am very proud to call Elijah Cummings my friend, and have been privileged to learn simply by watching him. He has been an incredible teacher. His love of people, the way that he acts intentionally and with resolve. He called people out against injustice, and our friend did not suffer fools gladly. He was an incredible man. His sense of morality lifted all of us. Elijah Cummings was indeed a tzaddik. Even though Elijah has left this world, his legacy of leadership and decency will endure forever. Again, summoning ancient Jewish teaching, one of the greatest of achievements in a person's life is the crown of a good name. Elijah, you wear that crown proudly because you have earned it, my friend. My friend, my teacher, my leader, may your memory be for a blessing for all eternity. Thank you very much.
We have a second guest to speak who has Zoomed here from Washington, Congressman John Sarbanes. Representing the 3rd District of Maryland, he sat with Congressman Cummings over the past 12 years on the Oversight Committee. He's done a lot for our city and state and country. We're so grateful that he is joining us. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Rachel. I'll be relatively brief. To Maya Rockymore Cummings, to the Cummings family, I bring condolences from my father, Paul Sarbanes, who wanted to be remembered, to the family. I did have the privilege, and I view it as a privilege of a lifetime, to have sat just a few feet away from Elijah Cummings for the last 12 years, the last 12 years of his journey on this earth. And I got to see how he fought for the left out and the locked out in America, why he was a champion of the downtrodden, the people whose name you never hear, but he held them deep in his heart. I got to see the fierceness with which he would question witnesses, not for himself, but on behalf of his constituents and on behalf of the issues that he cared deeply about. Elijah got the most angry and the most passionate, not when he was offended by someone's conduct, but when he thought somebody was treating other people badly. He sat on the Oversight Committee, which was the committee that has jurisdiction over all of the federal workforce, and I would see him get exercised when he felt that the rank and file member of the workforce was not being treated with dignity. And he would rise up and show his anger about that. So I got to see him in Washington, but I also got to see him in Baltimore. We always seem to be showing up at the same places. An event for the Maryland Food Bank, an event for the Cash Campaign, an event for Planned Parenthood, whatever the issue was, he was there. We did town halls together. I got to see the connection he had with his constituents, with the people of Baltimore, the Baltimore that he loved. So I consider myself privileged to have known him and to have considered him a friend and a mentor. I want to just close with a story many of you have heard. I had the opportunity to hear him tell this story at a community meeting, and I actually caught it on my iPhone, this particular version of that story. It's when he talked about the day he was sworn into the Congress in 1996. It was in a special election. And he looked up in the gallery and he saw his father up in the gallery. His father who'd never been to the Capitol before, never been on the Capitol grounds. And he noticed that his father appeared to be crying. He said he'd never seen his father cry before. Even when his father's mother had passed away, he had not seen him cry, but he was in the gallery crying. And after the ceremony, Elijah went up to his father and he said, "Were you crying?" And he said, "Yes, I was." And he said, "Why were you crying?" He said, "You think it's because you just became a congressman, don't you?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "That's not why I was crying." He said, "I was crying because when I looked at you and I saw what you've been able to accomplish, I thought about what I could have been. I thought about the fact that in the 3rd grade, I had to drop out of school to plant cotton and pick strawberries and never got an education. So when I saw you there, I thought about what I could have been." And Elijah finished telling that story by saying to the audience that day, we can't afford to have anybody grow up to be almost 70 years old thinking about what they could have been. That's why he was so focused on the next generation. So in closing, I will confess that in the last few days I felt a bit anxious because Elijah was leading us on a journey to reclaim our democracy. He talked all the time about fighting for the soul of our democracy. And I felt some anxiety because I was wondering whether we could get there without him, whether we could finish that fight without him. But then I realized that Elijah would not have left us unless he thought we had the power to finish that fight without him. And we will finish that fight for Elijah Cummings. Thank you all very much.
See what the end will be. Done made my vow to the
You know, Maya Angelou, I don't like to have my back to all of you, is quoted as saying one of my favorite of her quotes, and there are many. People won't remember what you say. People won't remember what you do. People will remember how you make them feel. And tonight, you're having a really big impact on all of us. Thank you. I'm introducing Ron Daniels, and if you have the order in front of you, if you're a speaker, I want to let you know Albert Reese will be going after, and then Michelle Waxman Johnson. Ron Daniels has served as the 14th president of Johns Hopkins University since 2009. He is a champion of reducing barriers to participation in higher education by students from diverse and lower socioeconomic backgrounds. Elijah Cummings was a frequent speaker at Johns Hopkins and a steadfast supporter of the institution's community's efforts, including Hopkins Local, Be Local, and Vision for Baltimore, and the Henderson Hopkins School. Congressman Cummings received an honorary degree from Johns Hopkins in 2015, and he also served as the commencement speaker. And for more on that, thank you, Ron, for being here and for all you do for Baltimore.
Good evening, and thank you for the privilege of joining so many esteemed colleagues and so many inspiring voices in grief and in celebration of the life and legacy of one of the greatest men many of us will ever know. For so many reasons, it is fitting that we are here tonight at Morgan State. Elijah deeply loved this university. He believed in its mission, he admired and adored its students, and he was wholly devoted to its leadership, and particularly the leadership of its current president, my friend, Dr. David Wilson. Now, Elijah was devoted to Hopkins too. And when he was with us, he made us feel, as he made everyone feel, beloved and special. But I'm not so naive as to believe that we were his favorite university in Baltimore. After all, there is only one Morgan choir. And it is fitting to commemorate the life of such an iconic and revered leader at an institution of learning, because Elijah believed so passionately in the power of education and truly exemplified what it meant to be a teacher. He was a thinker with an incisive intellect who studied the world around him, probing deeply into the most difficult issues we faced, and he urged others to do the same. He listened carefully to those whose voices were not the loudest, but in the end, the most in need of being heard. And in ways both unconscious and deliberate, he imparted knowledge and wisdom, implored us to embrace the complexity of our democracy, and charged us with living up to our highest aspirations as humans and as society. Each and every day of his life, Elijah taught us these lessons in words and, more importantly, in his actions. He preached bravery, and he lived it, refusing to be cowed by anyone, anywhere, whether violent segregationists or elected officials flouting the rule of law. He extolled bipartisanship, and he did the hard work of listening to his colleagues across the aisle, not simply to marshal the arguments against the other side, but to find common ground and forge solutions to problems that others saw as intractable. He exhorted us never to settle or to look away in the face of injustice or inhumanity, and he never did. He was ever present, bore witness, and always extended a hand. And like all truly great leaders, he could reach everybody, from presidents to principals to preschoolers. And he never hesitated to call anyone out on the carpet when he needed to, even in front of the whole class, including me as one of his most avid students. Time and time again, with unbounded moral clarity, he held up a mirror to our failings as individuals and as institutions, as both a critic and a sincere champion. He saw in us our potential to imagine and to do better, and he rightly brooked no complacency. As Elijah famously said, It is all about expectations. And in 2015, when he addressed the Johns Hopkins graduating class, whose ranks he joined upon receiving our university's highest recognition, our honorary degree, he set lofty expectations. You are the messengers to the future, he said. You must be the agents of change. Only you can guide us the rest of the way. Elijah will live on in the expectations he set and the lessons that each of us learned at his side. But above all, he will be present in the lives of our young people who are our guides to the future. His spirit, his life, and his legacy will be the lodestar for all of us as we continue the rest of the way. To Maya and to all of Congressman Cummings' family members who are with us today, we all lost a great friend, colleague, and champion last week. But nothing compared to what you have lost with Elijah's passing as father, brother, partner, husband, and confidant. Thank you for sharing so much of his life and his wisdom with all of us.
Thank you, President Daniels. I'd now like to introduce Dr. Albert Reese, the University of Maryland's Executive Vice President for Medical Affairs and Dean of the University of Maryland School of Medicine. Reese is a sought-after visiting professor, both nationally and internationally, and he recently shared the following quote: "We have lost one of our dearest friends and most passionate advocates. He cared gently and fought tirelessly." Thank you for being with us.
Good afternoon. Tonight I have the great honor of speaking on behalf of both the University of Maryland, Baltimore and the University of Maryland School of Medicine. To Maya and the entire Cummings family, we send our sincerest condolences. Our hearts are with you, our hearts are filled. We just want to reassure you that you have been and will continue to be in our prayers during this difficult time. Over the past week, we have begun the process of mourning the loss of Congressman Cummings. But I know that we have a long road ahead, as the impact he has made was not only wide, but very deep and very powerful. Whenever we experience loss, we tend to consider impact as we reflect on the meaning of life and the unique purpose of that individual's life. Most of us have goals and dreams that we set for ourselves. However, Congressman Cummings has goals and dreams that were collective goals and dreams to the benefit of all of us, but not for himself directly. At the University of Maryland School of Medicine, our ultimate institutional mission is to improve the health and well-being of the citizens of Maryland and beyond. Fortunately for us, we've had a champion, always had a champion whom we could always depend on and who was always with us at each step of the way. Congressman Cummings had similar goals and similar dreams, which he executed with great passion, as we all know. He shared a profound commitment to improving the lives of people of Maryland, and in particular, the citizens of Baltimore. He passionately advocated for the city's youth and the disadvantaged. But words were never enough for Congressman Cummings. His mantra was, and I quote, "Don't talk about what you can't do. Do what you can do," unquote. Congressman Cummings maintained the same quest for truth in government, politics, and equal opportunity as we do for truth in science and health equity. We have been very proud to share a dream also of truth and justice with Congressman Cummings. And we are very proud and honored to continue his legacy to aggressively advocate for the citizens of Baltimore and the state of Maryland. None of us choose how or when we come into this world, and we have no say when we leave this world. However, we do have control over what we do while we're here. Congressman Cummings is a wonderful example of making the most of the time we have on earth, and that is being a beacon of hope for others. That he did admirably. We will forever remember and greatly value the life and achievements of Congressman Cummings, which have truly changed our world. As I reflect on his life, his legacy, I believe his life is the embodiment of one of my favorite poems. And that poem is by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, called The Psalm of Life. And I'll read only a quote that I think beautifully reflects the life of Congressman Cummings. That excerpt states as follows, and I quote, "The lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing, leave behind us footprints on the sands of time. Let us then be up and doing, with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing, learn to labor and to wait." Goodbye, my friend. Thank you for all you've done.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Michelle Waxman Johnson. She is the board chair of the Elijah Cummings Youth Program. And I'm going to encourage the remaining speakers to come up all the way to me while I'm talking so that they can go begin speaking right away. And I'm going to decrease my introductions to try to move us along a bit. I hope that's okay with everybody. Speakers hear that? That's okay. So Michelle Waxman, come on over all the way. I'm not going to say everything. She also is the vice president at Central Scholarship. She will be brief and fabulous and tell you about what she's doing.
Good evening. I had long admired the passion, purpose, and presence of Elijah Cummings through only the lens of our TV. When I was asked to join the ECYP board in 2014, it was a dream come true. And what an honor to be elected vice chair and then board chair last year with the support of Congressman Cummings. I speak tonight on behalf of my colleagues on the ECYP Board of Directors, many of whom are here, along with our staff and our fellows. Shortly after I became board chair, Congressman Cummings called and asked how I was doing. I told him that I was feeling the burden of leadership, and he assured me that he understood exactly what I meant. I told him that I wanted to know what his dreams were for the Elijah Cummings Youth Program. He agreed that we would discuss, and I am so sorry that we never had that chance. Believe me, his involvement was not in name only. As the honorary board chair, he was very active, present at interviews, graduations, and welcome back ceremonies. He always called students when they were selected for ECYP, and he was our fundraiser in chief. ECYP held a 20th anniversary celebration on June 2nd. Congressman Cummings was the honoree. As I listened to him speak that night, I thought to myself, he is such a force. Our city, our state, and our nation are so lucky to have him. His passion for his beliefs is so strong, and through ECYP, we saw firsthand his passion for building bridges between the African American and Jewish communities. You may wonder why building such bridges was so important to Congressman Cummings. Andrew Danziger is a member of our Elijah Cummings Youth Program board. When we interviewed Andrew and asked why he wanted to serve, he shared a story that we did not know. His grandfather, Albert Friedman, a Jewish pharmacist in Baltimore, hired Elijah Cummings as a teenager to work with him in his pharmacy. Doc Friedman took young Elijah under his wing and became his mentor. He was kind to him and taught him all about running a pharmacy, but he also taught him about life. When Elijah was a senior in high school, Doc Friedman secretly filled out a college application for him for Howard University, and he paid his application fee. And once Elijah was attending Howard, he would get an envelope each month with money to help with his living expenses. He had hoped that young Elijah would follow in his footsteps as a pharmacist, but thank goodness for our nation, that did not happen. Congressman Cummings often spoke of the day when he called Doc Friedman to tell him that he did not want to be a pharmacist. He wanted to be a lawyer and fight for social justice. Doc Friedman told him that he was proud of him. Elijah Cummings never forgot Doc Friedman, who had a profound impact on his life, and we believe this story was the beginning of ECYP. I just want to tell you a little bit about some of our ECYP fellows and our 200-plus alumni. I was in Penn Station several years ago, chaperoning a field trip to the Congressional Black Caucus. While waiting for the train, I chatted with fellows who mentioned that they had never been on a train before. Some told me they had never been outside of Baltimore. Several months later, they were to board an airplane for Israel. Through Elijah Cummings, ECYP has opened the eyes and minds of young people from the 7th Congressional District for 21 years. At our annual ECYP graduation, Congressman Cummings always asked fellows to announce where they are headed to college. His delight with their plans was always apparent to all of us. He was most thrilled, of course, when students shared that they had chosen Howard or Morgan. On weekend mornings, I love tuning into CNN to watch Victor Blackwell, a member of our first ECYP cohort in 1998. And I'm thrilled that our vice chair, Sam Scott, who is here tonight, is next in line to be our first alumni to serve as board chair following the conclusion of my term. We have so many great stories, and we are so proud of all of our fellows and our alumni. Last month, we kicked off a planning process to look at the future of ECYP. Little did we know that our honorary chair, Elijah Cummings, would not be at the table with us, though I know that he will be there with us in spirit. We learned on Monday that the Harry and Jeanette Weinberg Foundation, thank you, Rachel, has made an extraordinary 3-year commitment to ECYP. We thank Rachel and the Weinberg Foundation board and staff for your strong support. We thank the Cummings family for requesting donations to ECYP. We appreciate the donations that have come in this week from near and far to continue the Congressman's ECYP legacy. To my friend Maya, and to all the family, and to the office family, on behalf of the ECYP Board of Directors, our staff, and our fellows, we pledge to do all we can to honor the memory of and continue the work begun by the Congressman through ECYP. We will miss his wisdom and his gigantic personality at our board table. I will miss seeing the name Elijah Cummings appear on my caller ID, but I promise you that we will never forget him. May your memories bring you comfort. May our friend Elijah Cummings rest in peace.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dr. Chris Ford. He was named director of the Baltimore School for the Arts in 2011. He's been there since 1981 when he got a job there first as a saxophone teacher. This past March, Elijah Cummings chaired the Baltimore School of the Arts Signature Gala, Expressions. At that event, Elijah received an impromptu standing ovation as he entered the gala and delivered very powerful remarks. Dr. Ford.
Thank you. Honored guests, friends, and family of Congressman Cummings. I'm pleased to speak a bit about the Congressman and his relationship with the children of the Baltimore School for the Arts. You've heard about his dedication to providing opportunities for young people. That is widely known and celebrated. Like every natural-born teacher, he saw the very best in every young person, the potential behind every smile. And he knew that it took work and resources and a supportive community to unveil the individual future of each person. He also felt the pain personally when a young person did not have that happy circumstance. Again, the instincts of a natural-born teacher. I know this last fact from personal experience with the Congressman. Several years ago, a student that the congressman had come to know made the decision to forego a college opportunity. Elijah wanted to know why, and he wanted to know what the school had done about the situation. I thought we'd done all that we could for this young person. He was very direct with me, and the answers I had, they might have satisfied me, they did not satisfy him. I pledged to do better in the future as an educator and for BSA as an institution. That exchange in itself is perhaps not so exceptional. The exceptional part is this. Even though the content of that conversation, well, let's use a nice word and say corrective, even though that message was difficult for me to hear, at the end of it, I felt inspired. I was inspired by his words, by his principle, and inspired by his passion to support each young person to the fullest. He could teach a tough lesson and inspire his student. That student would be me. Again, a natural-born teacher. So a bit about the happy circumstance of flourishing young people. Congressman Cummings was a longtime supporter of BSA Twigs, an arts training program for Baltimore youth in 2nd through 8th grade. He wanted every kid to have the opportunity to pursue their dreams. He engaged with the young people of Twigs, he encouraged their parents, and he supported the program in all the ways that we needed support. He wanted all of our young people to be nurtured in that voyage of personal discovery that happens in the art. With his support, BSA Twigs serves 700 Baltimore youth each year. And they discover their passions and their abilities and come to learn a little bit more about how wonderful they are. I'm very proud to say that about half of Baltimore School for the Arts' incoming class comes from this free arts program, the program that Congressman Cummings supported consistently over the years. Then there's Congressman Cummings' personal connection to BSA through his lovely daughter, Adia. I've read about his pride as she graduated from his alma mater, Howard University. I know he was equally proud of the journey she took as a student at BSA, a personal journey to understanding what made her tick, what made her feel whole, and where she found her passion. He was proud as a dad, and as all parents, we bless that journey to discover the unique talents of our children. That brings me to a saying that I heard him express many times, and others have obviously heard as well. Our children are our living message to a future that we will never see. I believe this is true. I believe this is deeply true. I know it is also a charge to send a transformative message to that future. I believe our children are up to the task, as long as we provide the nurturing garden to support their growth, their individuality, and their dreams. Thank you, Congressman Cummings, for your inspiring example and the charge to prepare our kids to send a message to the future that we will not see. Thank you for your fierce support of young people and your demand that we open their doors to their futures. We will strive to live up to your ideals and continue the work of the natural-born educator you exemplified so thoroughly. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Diane Bell McCoy. I asked Diane if she wanted me to say anything in particular for her introduction. Listen to this. This is what she wrote me. Thanks, Rachel. Here's my intro. A Black woman who believes deeply in Baltimore, a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, and a child of my ancestors. Diane, I want to thank you for your friendship and for working tirelessly for Baltimore, and I truly believe your ancestors are holding you in your heart.
Good evening. But I want to first say again to Maya, my absolute heart breaks for you and my condolence, but to his daughters and to all of the Cummings family. And I have to tell you, I remember when the girls were little girls in terms of at IHOP, and I would see you and your dad. But I also want to say good evening. Elijah was, of course, a friend to Associated Black Charities in so many ways related to linking us to opportunities and making time to hear our voice. He also was really essential of making sure we had a seat at the table. For Elijah, that was important, to making sure we had a seat at the table. But I have to tell you a personal story about Elijah to link it back, to say that my first conversation with Elijah was over 40 years ago. We were both working on a project with the Baltimore chapter of the NAACP. And it was actually early into his law practice. We worked together on a conference around criminal justice, and we worked talking about voter registration. And he was absolutely the young Elijah, passionate about our collectively making a difference. And he talked about that, the importance of our making a difference and coming together and our collective responsibility. Well, little did I know that my last conversation with Elijah would be eerily similar to my first, but it would be different in its intensity, an intensity I would only reflect upon his death. It was Maya, the Baltimore chapter of the Links Incorporated 11th Annual Luncheon on March the 9th, where Maya is a member. It was a fabulous event, and Elijah was at a table a few tables away from where I was seated. I'd not seen him since his health challenges, and I waited for an opportunity to go over and say hello after everybody was at the table saying hello. As I inquired about his health and indicated how glad I was to see him, I remember he acknowledged my comments. However, I don't quite remember what he said about that. What I do remember was my bending down to hear him tell me how very serious things were in Washington, how people didn't know how bad things were, how all of our efforts over the years were being undermined. He admonished me that people had to vote, that they had to understand how important, how critical that they vote, that they had to pay attention. He was very intense about telling me that. I remember nodding and acknowledging that I understood, but I can tell you now, I didn't fully grasp the urgency and the importance of his words until his death. And now I replay that brief conversation over and over in my head. So I certainly cannot provide you with the gift of words that Elijah had, but I can passionately ask that you heed his words to me, and words I assume he shared with others. Let us not take this democracy for granted. Do something, vote, but do more. Know that the policies that direct and guide our everyday lives, that provide some opportunities, even if they're not nearly enough, that provide services for those who would not have it were it not for federal policies, even if it's not nearly enough. Know that we must stay educated. Know that we have a voice. Know that what Elijah told me, we have a collective voice, and we can make a difference. His life proved that. And that we must make a difference. And even if it's helping your neighborhood or volunteering in someone else's neighborhood, join an effort, make a difference. Grow your own knowledge of structural racism and how it plays out in our lives, or how we unknowingly contribute to our own oppression. Elijah's life was a gift. I urge all of us to hear the intensity of his message and his legacy, and make his legacy our taking action. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Our next speaker is Kobe Little, Baltimore City NAACP President. Kobe was elected president of the Baltimore City NAACP in October 2018. He began his career as an organizer in Washington, D.C., and has managed dozens of political and grassroots campaigns across the country. We thank you very much for being with us this evening.
Good evening, my sisters and brothers. To our sister, Dr. Maya Rockymore Cummings, to the entire Cummings family, we extend our sincere condolences and our well wishes. I'm here this evening on behalf of the Executive Committee of the Baltimore branch of the NAACP, but I'm also here this evening on behalf of Ms. Tiffany Major, the President and CEO of the Greater Baltimore Urban League, and the President and CEO of the National NAACP, Mr. Derek Johnson. Elijah Cummings was an NAACP freedom fighter from a very early age. Senator Michael Bowen Mitchell loves to tell the story of how our congressman teamed up at a young age with his mother, Ms. Juanita Jackson Mitchell, and integrated the public swimming pools of Baltimore. We will remember Representative Elijah Cummings as a champion for voting rights, an advocate for justice in the law, a leader for transparency and accountability in government, a role model for young people, a patriot for the cause of democracy, a stalwart amongst public servants, a trumpeter of truth, a man of the people, a pilgrim among the faithful. Now we can hear our congressman say, as the Apostle Paul once said, "I have fought a good fight. I have finished my course. I have kept the faith." Congressman Elijah Cummings has run his race. He has served well. He was faithful until the end. So let us mourn the loss of our brother. Let us comfort his family and one another. Let us also preserve the memory of his service and valor. But so too, let us continue to follow his example and charge forward in the fight for freedom and justice. As a life member of the NAACP, Elijah Cummings knew when we fight for justice, we win. So let us say farewell to our brother, Elijah Cummings, and let us say hello to the fight for justice and democracy. Let us pick up the banner and fight the good fight for the education of our children. Let us fight the good fight against autocracy and corruption in high places. Let us fight the good fight for equity and sustainable development. Let us fight the good fight against homelessness and marginalization of God's children. Let us fight the good fight for justice and democracy. So, Baltimore, Maryland, and America, let us pick up the banner and build peace and build the beloved community. This evening, our President and CEO and our Chairman of the Board, Mr. Leon Russell, offer these words of comfort to the family of Congressman Elijah Cummings. On behalf of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, we express our deepest condolences on the passing of your loved one, Congressman Elijah E. Cummings. We join our city, state, and nation in mourning and sharing your tremendous loss. You are in our prayers, and you have our support today and in the days ahead. The NAACP pays special tribute to Congressman Cummings, a lifetime member and trusted friend of the association. During his time in Congress, he worked alongside us to address numerous issues, including racial profiling, election protection, voting expansion, and I do add here, my favorite Elijah Cummings story is the story that he tells about his mother on her sickbed, making him promise to protect our right to vote. Health care, housing access, educational opportunities, as well as critical work in preparation for the 2020 census. He was an unmistakable voice and champion for justice and democracy, a man of integrity and strength who inspired and challenged us in our efforts. It is with the utmost respect, admiration, and gratitude that we remember him. Congressman Cummings' devotion as a statesman to Baltimore and the civil rights movement was unsurpassed. He dedicated his life to combating oppression in all of its forms, and holding oppressors accountable. And he prevailed in the face of adversity against all odds. The NAACP will honor the legacy and the name of Congressman Cummings as we follow his example in lifting up those issues most important to the survival and progression of our communities, demanding social justice and equal opportunity for all Americans. Isaiah 51:12 reads, I, even I, am he who comforts you. We are trusting that you have seen the faithfulness of God, the God of all comfort, and will continue to abide in his peace as you endure your great loss. With heartfelt sympathy, Leon Russell, Chairman, National Board of Directors, Derek Johnson, President and CEO. Godspeed.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dr. Andre Bundley. He is the director of the Mayor's Office of African American Male Engagement, Connect. He was raised in Baltimore and educated in Baltimore City Public Schools. He holds degrees from Coppin State and Penn State. He began his career as a teacher and principal, and he is known as someone who has committed his adult life to reaching out to young men. He exemplifies what Elijah believed in his whole life. Thank you for being here.
Good evening. Love and condolences to the family. The night has been long, therefore I won't be. I just want to say that I've been inspired by the great man that we've all been speaking about tonight. And what brings me to the stage tonight is because he had an opportunity to witness men in Baltimore, predominantly black men in Baltimore, reaching individuals and places and spaces where few have chosen not to go. And that is in the place where he feels, he felt so comfortable, that is in the hood. He saw how we went to the neighborhoods in the 4-block by 4-block radius where the young men are, and we began to reach them with resources. And the process is working. And so I just wanted to stop by and say that I'm so happy that his legacy will live on through ideas that he's put forth. He said, you must go to those young men, because in many cases their confidence has been broken to the point where they won't come outside of that 4-block by 4-block radius. So Mark and Harry, when we started talking about 10,000 men, we're up to 300 now, where we go out to the hood. And one of the pastors shared with me that what you all are doing, Andre, is basically something that is described in the Bible. I'm not a preacher, but they tell me it's in, I think it's Matthew 25, verses 35 to 40, and it ends where they say, what you've done to the least of thee, you've also done unto me. And they're talking about feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, visiting the sick. And so this is a process where the government, it has a role to facilitate the process, but we now have about 30 pastors asking each of them to bring their 10 to 40 men. We will get to 10,000, because one of the things that we understand, and I'm so thankful that our mayor has embraced this concept. One of the things that we see when we come down the street, and there are 300 of us, and we come with love and strength, I don't care what it is that they're doing. When we come with the love and the strength, they stop and pay attention. And they want to hear what we have to say. And so I'm excited that I hear the Honorable Congressman. I hear him saying, come on now. I hear him saying, we're better than that. And so that's what we're saying to our young men on the corners. Come on now. You're better than that. And so I don't know about you, but that great man will live forever. He will live forever through those of us who choose to do what is right. And so I just want to thank all of you for just paying homage to a man who deserves it. It's easy to resoundingly hear from somebody who has said something. And I'm thankful that that man has spoken to us and he continues to speak to us. And I appreciate all of you showing him great love tonight. And I want to thank our staff who are out, and many of them are here tonight. Let's continue to work because we can get Baltimore done in a way that we need to get it done. But we got to go where the people are. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going out of order for a minute. We're going to Zainab Chandri, who's the director of the Maryland Outreach at the Council of American Islamic Relations, or CAIR, the nation's largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization. She has a very impressive background and professional experience, and she's won many awards locally and nationally, and I'm not taking the time. She's coming to speak.
American Islamic Relations, and the American Muslim community, here this evening to pay tribute to a public servant and people's champion whose legacy has inspired our city, our nation, and our world. To dear Dr. Maya Rockeymoore Cummings, to the entire Cummings family, to his friends, to his staff, and all those who loved and respected and admired him, we extend our sincerest condolences. Congressman Cummings was a disciplined leader and an ally who recognized that while consensus is important to move towards progress, it must never come at the expense of our principles and our integrity. He was a fair and just leader, proudly rooted in community. While his work took him physically to Washington, D.C. and elsewhere, we know that his heart was clearly right here in Baltimore. When President Trump's Muslim ban went into effect, Congressman Cummings stood with our communities. He spoke out when it was neither popular nor politically expedient. He was a strong supporter of immigrants and refugees, a fierce advocate on key issues like voting rights and family separation. The trajectory of his own remarkable life served as an example to underprivileged and disadvantaged communities that even the sky is not the limit when you are willing to put in hard work and make sacrifices. Over the course of my own personal career, as somebody who was born and raised in the 7th Congressional District, I've been fortunate to cross paths with Congressman Cummings many times. The very first time we met, he asked where I was from. I replied that I'm from Baltimore. Usually when I get that question, I brace myself for the response, no, but where are you really from? Congressman Cummings looked at me and he said, I believe that. My final meeting with him was at a mosque in Montgomery County. Despite the physical toll, he stayed well over time to meet and speak with Muslim leaders. At a stage in life when many others would choose to stay out of the public eye and prioritize their own well-being, he continued to serve others until the very end. It's said that a measure of a man can be determined by the number of lives that he has touched. It's evident from the remarks that we have heard tonight, from the outpouring of support and solidarity and condolences from all around the world, that Congressman Cummings was someone who touched more lives than we can even begin to count. He was a voice for truth and moral clarity, whose strength and conviction will continue to be a beacon of light for so many in these dark times. Because of his tireless advocacy and service, the arc of the moral universe bends more towards justice tonight. We can be assured that he is now dancing with angels, knowing that he did everything he possibly could to keep our democracy intact. The poet Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "To know that even one life has breathed easier because you have lived, that is to have succeeded." Brothers and sisters, our congressman lived a very successful life. May he rest in the shade of God's mercy. His success is evident by the legacy that he leaves behind. Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi rajiun. To God we belong, and to him is our return. Again, our sincerest condolences to Dr. Maya and to the entire Cummings family.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Edna Manslake, if you'll please come forward. The Fayette Street Outreach Organization was founded in 1994 by a group of residents who were fed up with the problems that plagued Southwest Baltimore and their neighborhood, and they pledged through a mission to build a better, safer, healthier community for the residents. This past April, Fayette Street Outreach opened a much-needed community center in West Baltimore, a project that Elijah was very supportive of and helped find funding for. Thank you for being with us.
I give my condolences to Dr. Meyer and his daughters and extended family. Your father, your husband, my congressman, was a very strong man, a strong soldier. He was my mentor, and as I heard everybody else say, when you didn't do the right thing, he leaned on you, but it was for the good. He looked at the area where I was living and asked me to organize because we weren't getting any type of funding whatsoever. I stayed true to that, but he would often push me, but in a good way. He found the strength in me that at the time I couldn't see, but he helped to bring it out of me. He would come down to my community. He would let his constituents know that he cared. He would listen to all of their complaints and concerns. He was there. He wasn't absent. One day we did a walkthrough through our neighborhood. There were guys standing on the corner, and we were thinking we were walking with the congressman. We looked back, and he was standing on the corner with the guys, talking to them, trying to find out what it was that they needed so he could go back and he could put that in place for them. And that's what he did. Later, he helped us to get funds. That funding went to a community center that, thank God, is open now, and we have kids coming through. By the end of August, Congressman Cummings stopped by. We had a coding class with kids from the ages of 8 to 12. He had heard about the coding class and he wanted to come by to see it. He came by, and on the day that he came by, there were a group of news people outside. He walked in the door and he shut the door and he said, "I don't need that. We don't need that. That's poison, and we're going to keep that outside." And when he walked into that center and he saw the kids at the computer, and he wanted to know, what are they doing? And one little guy said, "We're coding." He says, "What is coding? Can you show me?" And he sat on his little walker, and he sat there, and he watched the kids, and he listened to them. And that one kid showed him what he was doing. He was fascinated. He said, I'm only going to be here for a little while. But that little while stayed for about over an hour. And he was excited. And he was pleased. And when he left, he said to me, Adna, keep the good work going. You're doing an excellent job. That was my friend, my mentor, and yes, I am going to miss him, but let me tell you, family, that little center that we have right now, please come by and see it, because this is the center that your father helped to build. He is my mentor, my friend, and most of all, my hero. Thank you.
Okay, we have 3 speakers, a final song, and then Maya will share some words. So our next speaker is Dr. David Wilson. He is the 10th president of Morgan State University. I'm not going to give you his whole bio. 1 million degrees from Tuskegee University, from Harvard, statistics here that are insanely successful. Let's let him talk. It's time to let the speakers talk so we can move.
Good evening. Before I begin my very brief remarks this evening, I would like to recognize the members of the Morgan State University Board of Regents who are here with us tonight. Several of them had to leave, but the ones who are here, can you please stand so we can officially recognize you? First, we have the Chair of the Board of Regents, the Honorable Kwaisi Mfume. And Regent Mfume will be speaking at the funeral on Friday. We also have with us General Larry Ellis, who is the Vice Chair of the Board over here. We have Regent Penelope Taylor, who is next to Regent Ellis, Regent Weston Wilkerson, and we have a student who is a member of our Board of Regents, Regent Saffron Stubbs. And one more, Regent Dr. Linda Gilliam is in the back as well. Thank you. Thank you. Congressman Elijah Cummings faithfully served as a member of the Board of Regents here at Morgan for 19 years, and most recently as chair of the Audit and Institutional Assessment Committee. During my nearly 10 years as president here, he rarely missed a meeting, and he was very committed to the mission of this institution and to our amazing students, and wanted to ensure that he, as a congressman, would do everything in his power to ensure their success. Indeed, in the 152-year history of Morgan, Congressman Elijah Cummings is the only person that has delivered the commencement address here 2 times. This is how much we value who he was and what he had to say. Now, unlike some of the other speakers who have come before me, I have only known Congressman Cummings for 9.5 years. And I first met him as I was making my way from Wisconsin to Maryland. And the Board of Regents reached out to me to have a conversation with them about becoming the 10th president of the university. And I entered the board room, and there were 15 regents sitting around the table, and they began to pepper me with all kinds of questions. And Congressman Cummings was soaking all of this in. And it was his moment to ask me a question. And this is the question he asked. Dr. Wilson, why do you want this job? he was not so impressed with the academic degrees or with all of the places that I had been before I would raise my hand to Morgan. What he wanted to hear from me, and I did not know it, was what was in my heart. He wanted to hear whether I had a passion for the great opportunity to take young people where they were and move them where they needed to be competitive with anyone, anywhere, on any world stage. And I answered that question by saying that there was an institution much like Morgan that had taken the son of a sharecropper and had given him a chance to go out and experience the world. And as a result of that, it was time for this son of a sharecropper to repay that journey. And when I finished, he said, "You really do get us. I think you'll do well by being president of this great university." And it was at that moment that I did not realize, but I would realize later, Maya, that Elijah and I became kindred spirits. And it had to do with that struggle, with the fact that he was so genuine, he was so authentic, he was so real. He didn't get caught up in all the trappings, all of the accoutrements of the position. He was a person who led with his heart. And I connected to him on that level. And then I saw another side of him that also left me in tears. It was 5 years into my presidency here at Morgan, when the social unrest began here in Baltimore in April of 2015. And when I stop and reflect upon such a challenging time in our city, a city that I was still settling into and getting to know, I was so deeply moved as I would turn on the television each night and I would see Congressman Cummings in the street fighting every single night. So much so that he lost his voice, and I will forever remember the tears that were welled in his eyes as he was fighting with all of his heart and all of his soul to restore peace to our great city of Baltimore. Dr. Rockimore Cummings, now I know that Elijah loved you. He spoke about you often. And I know he loved our great nation. And I know he loved our great state of Maryland. But during that turbulent time, it was abundantly clear to me that Elijah loved himself some Charm City. He loved the Baltimore. He had a very special love for the city of Baltimore. And when I got the message that he had passed, I must admit, I felt, and still do, that a piece of the heart of Baltimore has passed too. And I was so encouraged with the last speakers because it showed that that heart is still in us. And he is leaving behind all of these possibilities. And for that, we are grateful as a city, and we will continue to build on his great legacy. And so as I bring my remarks to a close, I would like to say that the Morgan State University family, our entire family, spread all over the world, is indeed honored this evening to host this celebration and tribute. I thank you, Dr. Rockimore Cummings, for allowing Morgan State University to serve as Elijah's first stop on his journey home. And because I think it is most appropriate that the city that he loved so dearly, and this institution that he loved equally dearly and served with great distinction, would have the first opportunity to bid our great champion farewell. And so, yes, we are presenting a resolution, and we're not going to read it because we are an academic community, and you can see that it is a dissertation. But I want to read, if you will, the last statement. It says, resolved that the Morgan State University family salute and praise Congressman Elijah E. Cummings, one of the towering and most significant figures in our 152-year history, with the slightly modified words of Mark Antony when he was speaking of Brutus in Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. Quote, this was one of the noblest Americans of them all. His life was gentle, and the elements so mixed in him that nature might stand up and say to the world, this was a man. God, rest Elijah's soul. May he live in the other world in peace and rest in power.
Thank you so much. I also just want to, while Dr. Wilson is on the stage, thank Dr. Wilson and the entire staff and faculty and student body here for hosting this event. We appreciate it deeply. We have two speakers. Hang in there. Gwendolyn Boyd, Dr. Gwendolyn Boyd. She is extraordinary. Prepare yourselves. Former Alabama State University president, a champion of STEM, the first African-American woman to earn a mechanical engineering degree from Yale, also has degrees from Alabama State and Howard, spent more than 30 years with IBM and Johns Hopkins in applied physics. She is the real deal, and she spoke at the College Bound luncheon this past summer, if you heard her, and told quite an extraordinary story about how she needed to break through walls and barriers and did so powerfully and gracefully.
Praise the Lord, everybody. Praise the Lord, everybody. This is the day the Lord has given us to celebrate a great man of God, a servant leader, an honorable man who was a fighter until the end. This is the day that we have come to celebrate Elijah Cummings, the one who embodies the Negro spiritual, this little light of mine. I'm going to let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm going to let it shine because Jesus gave it to me. So I'm going to let it shine. And so tonight we've come to honor this great man. And when I met him in the early 80s, and we had an opportunity, everybody's got an Elijah story. We've heard them all night long. But when I had an opportunity to meet him and he learned that I was from Alabama, we shared how we had integrated spaces. He, the pools here in Baltimore, and I integrated my middle school and high school in Alabama. And we were inextricably bound together at the hips forever. We understood, and we all know that he was a fighter. We know that when he came to the mic, he had that preaching cadence that made you stand up and listen to every word he said. And so we know that we've lost in this community one who will always be remembered for being a freedom fighter, for one who was a speaker for social justice. And I'm grateful to have called him my faithful and loyal friend. Whenever I needed him to speak for anything, he was always there if his schedule would allow it. And so I am honored tonight just to say to Maya and to the family that we are continuing to pray for you. And to all of us who are still here on this side, that we will be able to honor Elijah if we take our lights and trim and burn them and let God use us on this side to be great men and women of God. To God be the glory for the great man Elijah was.
That's a good commencement speech, I'm just saying. Our next speaker before Maya is Norris Davis. Norris, please come forward. Norris is a longtime friend and confidant of Elijah's. He served for many years on the congressional staff. He also happened to play a character on The Wire. I imagine you could hold court with us for a long time telling stories Elijah may or may not want us to know. I also want to thank you for your friendship to Elijah because you were someone he could trust to tell the good and bad and know it was safe. So from all of us, the strength you gave him as a friend, we want to say thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. To Dr. Maya Rockymore and the Cummings family. I thank you for giving me this brief opportunity. I want to share a story. Elijah and I met him when I was living a very different life. I had been incarcerated and I needed a job. He gave me a job. And not only did he give me a job, he transformed my life. He touched my life in a way that encouraged me to see the best in me when I saw the worst in me. He encouraged me to accent my writing ability. I started writing for The Wire. I didn't have any idea that I had that talent in me because I came up in the inner city. That's all I knew. But he knew something different, and he believed in me, and he encouraged me to believe in myself. And today, I'm a great man and a child of God. And I'm so sad. I've lost a friend, a dear friend. I can't give you all the accolades and the big words. All I can give you is my heart. He gave me that. So I thank all of you. I thank the Cummings family. I thank Dr. Rockymore for giving me this opportunity because I've lost a dear friend.
Thank you very much for being with us. So Maya's going to come to the stage. While she's coming, I just want to again thank Morgan State and all the staff. I also would like to give a shout out to my husband and son Ben, sitting over there very politely. I'd also like to give a shout out to the Weinberg Foundation staff for caring about Elijah and caring about this event. Earlier this summer, I will conclude with this, and I am an epic fail as your MC because we're ending so late. I just didn't feel comfortable having people feel they had to rush when they were saying such great things. When Elijah was in his office this summer, sitting below photographs of Nelson Mandela and Coretta Scott King, he said, "I don't know why I'm here. I don't know how long I'll be here, but I am here, and I'm going to make the best of it." And by George, did he ever. Thank you, Maya.
Didn't Rachel do a good job tonight? Let's thank Rachel. Let's thank Morgan State University and this wonderful choir behind us. Let's thank God for everyone who showed up today and for who showed Elijah their loves and paid their respects. We certainly appreciate you. On behalf of the family, those family members who are still here, please wave your hand in the front row. We would just like to say thank you for loving Elijah Eugene Cummings. Because guess what? He loved you. He loved his job. He loved representing the people of the 7th Congressional District. And he loved serving in the U.S. Congress, where he could fight on your behalf and fight for the values and the people that matter. He was definitely a champion of the underdog. Everything he did was to make sure that those who had been oppressed, depressed, stressed out, and marginalized got a better chance in life. And he made sure, till his dying day, that he was a supporter of people who needed an uplifting hand. People often ask me how I met Congressman Elijah Cummings. I got to Washington, D.C. in 1997 basically as an ABD, graduate student. I came to collect data from my dissertation. Elijah Cummings was one of the first members of Congress to grant me an interview. And the subject matter was HIV/AIDS. Now remember, this is 1997. There was a lot of stigma around HIV/AIDS. People, especially in the African American community at that time, we were talking about the changing face of AIDS, but we still had this notion of the stigma associated with homosexuality. The whole notion that, AIDS was quote unquote the gay disease, that, the people who captured it were perhaps somehow deserving of the disease that they got. And so it was my job, and I was exploring the African American political response to HIV/AIDS to understand how the Congressional Black Caucus was internalizing this disease and what they were doing about it. And I went into his office, and we had a long, extended conversation about what he was doing right here in Baltimore. In the midst of the stigma, in the midst of the misinformation and the disinformation around this disease, this was a man who was standing up and working with those with HIV/AIDS. He did not care about the stigma. He saw a population in a group that was hurting, a population in a group that was marginalized, and he was working and doing his best to make sure that they got the resources they needed in order to extend their lives and live a better life. And so with that, I labeled him a transformational leader in my dissertation. A transformational leader. Little did I know that later we would become great friends. I mean, literally. It was like we knew each other for a million years. The conversation just flowed effortlessly. And then, of course, over time, our friendship morphed into a great love that, that has been the honor of my life, to walk with this great man and to be with him as he did all of the tremendous things he did on behalf of the nation. So let me just tell you this. We often talk about Congressman Cummings and his love of Baltimore. But in this past week, I have heard from people from Egypt, from Japan, from Brazil, from France.
I have heard from people from all over the world who have watched Elijah and watched his walk, his authentic walk, and empathized and understood and identified with him as a leader. And I just want to say on behalf of the family that we thank all of you for everything that you've done, but I know that he would want to say this. He would want to say, I thank you for allowing me to serve. And so before I leave the stage, I've just got to say this. This program came together in 4 days. Every speaker that you heard up here today basically said right away, yes, we will speak. And they came and they showed up en masse, and I just want to say thanks to all of them. I want to say thanks to Elijah's staff. Can you stand? The staff members. I don't know if you know, but it is unusual for members of Congress on either side, either the Senate or the Congress, to keep and retain staff for so many years. But Elijah kept and retained staff. They loved him and he loved them. And we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for giving everything that you have to the 7th Congressional District. And it's the same thing with his committee staff in Washington and also his other personal staff in Washington. They come to work on our behalf, and they loved to work with Congressman Elijah Cummings. And so with that, I also want to acknowledge and thank Shauna Watley. Shauna, can you stand? Tammy Buckner. Dina Curtis, stand. Rosalind Smith, stand. Michelle Speaks, I don't think she's here tonight. These are the ladies that helped me pull together the next 3 days of the celebration of Elijah's life. And I just want to say thank you for everything that you've done to help me out. So Morgan State University, March Funeral Home, New Psalmist Baptist Church, the Office of Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Kingdom Fellowship, all of these institutions have had an important part and role in playing in organizing this week's activities. But I've got to say this. Ron Daniels, can you stand? Johns Hopkins University, where we spent so much of the last 2.5 years of Elijah's life. I just want to say thank you to all of the professionals. Thank you. The nurses, the technicians, the excellent doctors, every single person over there showed nothing but kindness, respect, and service. They treated Congressman Cummings well, and I truly believe that his life would not have been extended as long as it has been without the professional assistance that he received from the professionals at Johns Hopkins University and at Johns Hopkins Hospital and the medical system. And so I just want to say thank you for that. And I want to end with this story about one of the last days of Elijah's life. I don't know if you remember last Tuesday, the day before Wednesday. Wednesday was a rainy day. Tuesday was a glorious day. I don't know if you remember that. The folks came in from the rehabilitation people came in and said, you know, we want to give you some sunshine therapy. We want to give you some sunshine therapy. But at this point, Elijah could not get out of bed. And so they wheeled his hospital bed up to the 14th floor of the hospital where the helicopters land. And they allowed us to go out on the roof of Johns Hopkins Hospital. And we wheeled Elijah out, and he looked upon the Inner Harbor. He looked upon South Baltimore, where he grew up. He looked at the downtown. He looked towards the west side, and it was so glorious. And he said, boy, I've come a long way. Man, has he come a long way. This was a great man. a man who has inspired so many, but he has been just as inspired by all of you who have poured so much into him. So with that, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for everything that you've done. Thank you for loving Elijah. And thank you, most of all, for knowing that it's up to all of us to carry his legacy forward. Thank you so much.